Hey, everybody. Welcome to MSP Initiative's weekly Tuesdays and Thursdays calls. I am filling in for George Bardisi while I am no substitute for the great George Bardisi. I will try to do my best to run this one. It makes it a little bit easier when you have someone that you know on the call. We got Ian Richardson today. First, we're going to just do a little bit of housekeeping, as George always does. Going to pop on the screen here. And Jen, could you enable sharing real quick? I love how Zoom does that security, even when you don't want it.
That's right.
Oh, Jen, are you still there?
Yes, I am. I'm where I can enable sharing for you.
It should be just click on my screen and then enable. If not, I'll just talk about it.
Yeah, it is not letting me do that for you.
Okay, don't worry about it. I know Zoom and Teams have been doing a lot with security and it's been changing. So maybe we have some IT folks in the house that could help out. But anyway, we'll get started here. Just want to remind everybody that MSP Initiative is recorded. These things are in podcast form. You can watch them again on the page, mspinitiative.com. There is an event coming up, MSP Community Minds. It's going to be a fantastic event. Actually, Ian is a speaker at that event as well. It's going to be all educational, and you're going to actually walk away with something tangible, which, Ian, I remember we used to leave events walking away more confused than when we started because we had so much information poured into our brains. So from that
That's for sure.
it's nice to see some events that are going to be more workshop-ish and educational, and so really cool things. Also, if you go to the community, if you go to mspinitiative.com, they also have an industry calendar on there that you can click on. It'll show you all the events for the whole year, so you have a good idea of what's going on. Segue right into Ian and I happen to both be in the same city for the first time in a really long time. We're both in Orlando at Jennifer Bleem's event. Ian, talk a little bit about Jennifer's event right now and what you're doing here.
Yeah. So in the same vein as MSP Community Minds, which again, August in Denver, see you guys there. There's a lot of talk tracks. There's a workbook that came with it, which is nice. And a lot of the speakers so far have been talking about actionable items. It's very sales focused. Jennifer is a sales coach, so it's a sales focused conference, but a lot of call outs in the room to, hey, like, grab your workbook and take down notes as it applies to your business. So almost like a miniature preview of the upcoming event for MSP Initiative in Denver, where getting some actionable intel. And Ken, you really hit the nail on the head. I remember when I was going to conferences as an attendee, the problem would be is you go session to session to session to session and then right into a party. And there wasn't really a lot of time to say, like, hey, here's some theory and now map out how you're going to do it, because by the time you get like 2 hours into that party, everything's gone, right? You've drank enough and you've had enough fun that it's like,
Right.
hey, what the hell did I learn yesterday?
Yep, it's definitely interesting to think about. And there's a lot of really great events, and you know, their intentions were great at those times, right? We would go to those events and we would we would see a lot of cool things, but it's the takeaways. It's like you leave and you're like, man, there was this speaker said something really, really good, but I don't remember it. And I have to go back and try to figure out what had happened. So, try to reel it in a little bit. And then when it's crammed between, all these other things that either work or don't work for you, based on what direction they're going on. And like I said, there's still some great events out there, but I think there's a huge need for events that you can have tangible takeaways, especially as MSPs, where we don't have the type of time to do all that and then come back empty-handed and not be, not have some actionable items coming out of that.
Yeah, that essentially the double use of the time where, hey, here's the theory, but now there's some dedicated time to workshop out the basics of a plan. Are you going to go from 0 to hero in a day? No, but I think that the hardest part in business is going from 0 to 1, not 0 to 100. Like you just did 100% improvement by taking the first step,
right?
And every subsequent step afterwards is a lesser percentage. So if you're taking the time to go to MSP Community Minds and it's a, hey, you've gone from 0 to 10 by learning the theory, getting it written down, saying these
Right.
are the big first 5 steps that I got to do at my business. Doesn't matter if you put that book in your bag and you're not taking it out for 2 more weeks because you got to rebuild after you've been out of the office for 2
Right.
days. You've got the steps, you've got that plan in your hand. You can say, oh, well, here's what I got to calendar out now. And that's the key difference between that and a purely talking head talking at you type of session. The workshop methodology works.
Right. 100%. So let's dive into you. I mean, it was great. We talked about the events for a little bit and, a little bit of housekeeping here with talking about MSP Community Minds in Denver. And it was, let's get those dates just to make sure, August 14th and 15th in
Yep.
Denver. Great time of year to be in Denver in August. And again, it's a great time to be anywhere where you're going to have so many smart people trying to help, people who want to help and not just sell. So it's going to be a great time. So Ian, let's talk a little bit about you and Richardson and what's going on with you. I mean, you were an MSP for many years. You and I met when you were an MSP and I had just started at PAX 8 at the time and we built this great relationship. And so you have another person in this industry that has a unique experience of being on both sides of the fence. And, let's talk a little bit about what you're doing to help MSPs right now.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, I owned and operated a healthcare and compliance focused MSP for 16 years. I sold it then to 21. We were a couple $1 million operation. And through joining, I'd say probably the biggest impact was around 2017, joining a peer group organization and getting involved with some peers kind of helped me realize that, hey, I didn't have a business so much as a fancy, stressful, low return on investment job. And so the final portions of that career were really improving the bottom line and systematizing and reduction of people dependency in the company. And through COVID and a divorce, got burned out and sold it. And took a little bit of time to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. But I went through a personal strategic plan called Life Plan. And what dropped out of there was one, hey, I didn't want to own an MSP anymore. So took those steps. And then 2, instead of doing execution work and being an executor, meaning like going out and doing the work, consultation and coaching and guidance was more in line with who I was. So I wanted to help the people who were looking to execute figure out how they were going to do that. And Richardson was born out of that. And you mentioned that there's a pairing. My wife and far better half, Carrie, recently sold her telemarketing agency, and that's what forms Richardson and Richardson. So we help folks who want to grow figure out how they're going to grow, either through sales and marketing strategy. And the other side of it is people who are frustrated, which usually stems from communication and team and leadership. We help out with those skill sets too, and use a lot of different methodologies. It's not just crazy off the wall stuff that Ian's come up with, but I do have a few of those tools. A lot of it are methodologies that have been tried and true. So Tom Patterson's body of work through StratOp and Life Plan are 2 things we do. I do a lot of stuff with Dr. Larry Little and his methodologies. So we've gone out and gotten certified in tried and true methodologies that helped me out at Doberman. I said, well, why would I reinvent the wheel? I went and got qualified to facilitate and implement those systems for people we work with.
Yeah,
that's R&R in a nutshell.
Yeah, and you're. I mean, you did take that to a great new level too, as far as doing those things, buying into them. And so let's talk a little bit about that, because you and I have a lot of conversations around what works and what doesn't work from an MSP perspective. And we've both been through different iterations, from a size perspective and a maturity perspective. The one thing that nobody wants to talk about is the pain. They talk about the pain of running an MSP, and you know how hard that is. But why is nobody willing to take a little bit more upfront pain to get away from the pain that is dealing with being an MSP, right? You know, we talk about EOS and we talk about these systems, and it's painful. It's not a silver bullet, right? There never is. It's a painful process, but wouldn't you rather have that pain up front as opposed to just dealing with the same thing you're dealing with year over year with no growth, no direction? So I mean, I already know your standpoint, but explain to everybody listening, you know, what are your thoughts around, you know, not a matter of if, but how should they and how quickly should they adopt something like EOS, a system that's going to actually take them to the next level? And then, of course, your thoughts around what on top of EOS do they need?
Yeah. There's a lot of different systems out there. A big fan of, a little aside, I'm not certified in EOS, so I'm not part of the EOS franchise. So this is just an empirical view from outside in. Gino's a fantastic man and a great marketer, and took a lot of public domain tools and then put some really smart thoughts behind it and pivoted it into the tool suite that's EOS. And I think if your major pain in your world is that your team isn't executing or isn't holding each other accountable, which doesn't mean being a jerk, right? It just means having those honest conversations on like, hey, Ken, we said we were going to do X and we didn't do X. Help me understand that. What do we need to support? How do we coach up or coach out in that scenario?
And
EOS,
also, and you bring up a good point, right? It's not about being mean or aggressive or any of that. But, you know, the approach that I always took was, you know, how can I help you be better? Am I enabling you or am I disabling you by, you know, with my actions? Is there something that we're not doing correctly to get you to that, right? So I agree with that 100%.
yeah, that's like EOS does that better than almost anything. It like if you lean into that tool set, it does an amazing job at teaching teams how to execute and how to have effective accountability conversations. And both of those rely on structure. The downfall with that is that execution and accountability doesn't really do vision. It's not, EOS isn't necessarily a visionary, inspiration, cultural building system outside of that culture of execution and accountability, which is a good cornerstone. It's a good bedrock. But you can kind of, as with all systems, you can outgrow it. When you get to, once you've got that flywheel, to use the Jim Collins piece, Jim Collins terminology, once you have that flywheel built and you're used to spinning it, execution accountability will go for a while, but nobody really gets inspired by it. Okay, well, we're $10 million, we're going to be $20 million. That doesn't inspire people. That doesn't like portray impact. Even things like, hey, we're going to help 100 businesses. Okay, well, how are we going to do that? What does that mean? What are the values that make us up? What's the vision really out? So broadening scoping on vision, as well as being a little more prescriptive on how you're going to do things, can be helpful. And that's the methodology I went to. Which again, it's flavors for different companies. But to circle all the way back to what you were talking about, and then I went off on a EOS tirade and gave it a gold star. I think EOS does deserve a gold star. I think there's a pervasive toxic, cancerous theme in the MSP industry, and it's across all things: sales, marketing, security, efficiency, whatever. There is a toxic trend where if you buy X, everything will be solved for you. It's magic pill syndrome. It's snake oil. It's this silver bullet, and everybody's casting around. I've got all this pain. I just want to make it go away by swallowing this pill or doing this one thing or buying this one product or hiring this one whatever. And that's BS.
Yeah.
To put it straightforward.
Hey,
Like there is
Ian,
no.
just quickly, I missed Keith made a comment about pain. He says pain builds character, and I'm trying to become a character.
I absolutely agree. Like that's if you like think about getting in shape, you can't like you can take a pill to help with weight control. You can take a pill to help with mental focus, right? Like there are certain things that you can do to augment the ability to focus on things. You could take a bunch of speed to be able to work out harder, but eventually that'll come back, right? Like
Right.
speed's a magic pill. You'll be pounding that gym and then you'll hurt yourself, right? And that's what the same concept applies to a business. Like, yes, you can do things. You can bring in a coach or a consultant. You can adopt a system. You can buy some products. You can reorganize the way you do processes. But at the end of the day, the only way that you can grow and fix a business is to work on growing and fixing a business. And that means that you, and that's a collective you, your organization, your leaders, your front line, you have to do a bunch of hard work. Nobody can do it for you. Because when you hire someone else, they're working on growing their business. Now, their business might be to help you grow yours, and there might be honest or dishonesty there. But anyone who's promising this magic transformative event without a huge pile of super hard work is lying. Just the same way as if you go to a physical fitness trainer and they say, well, yeah, we can do this and I'll help you optimize and exercise, but you're going to have to go do it if you want to shed that 100 pounds. Like that's what it is you have to go do the
Why do you
hard
always got to
work.
drag me into these conversations? I know I got to lose
I
100 pounds. Why?
just like to be inclusive. I like to be inclusive, Ken.
Ian,
I'm
listen,
trying to think.
that's where you can tell how good of friends we are. Because normally someone would go, no, Ken, not you. You're like, no, I want to be inclusive.
I want to include you in the conversation, Ken. That's I'm trying to make it relatable. You gotta relate to your audience. No, that's but that's the biggest thing is like you have to be willing to accept the pain, which means in general, like where I was when we started doing StratOp, that involved night work, that involved weekend work, that involved a bit of financial sacrifice, right? If I'm spending money on coaches and consultants to help me execute this, or spending extra money on incentivizing my team to do these types of actions, maybe work through some lunch, pull a night or weekend here or there to help develop these plans. I had to sacrifice blood, sweat, and finance, blood, sweat, and treasure to achieve the execution. And the execution isn't like this magic up and to the right, right? It's not that magic, oh, it's a smooth thing. It's like this is the path, right? You always see those types of pictures online. The path to success, really the path would be more like this. A big loop. And then you're kind of going up to the right, right? Like it seems like you're growing, and then, oh no, I'm on a loop-to-loop roller coaster. And I'm about to crash into the ground. But you will be making that forward spiraling progress, right? And some days you're going to take 10 steps back to make one giant step forward.
Right.
But that's okay. That's how it is. So.
Yep. Yeah. And I love how, all the things that you're saying tie right into the process, right? It all ties back to this EOS piece. And we say EOS just so everybody knows it's entrepreneurial operating system. And there's different ones. There's Traction, there's Patterson, there's a no relation to me, unfortunately. I'm not related to this Patterson. I'm not related to James Patterson, the writer. I'm just not, I don't have any of those ties. They could only be so lucky. So the tie-in is really great because I love the line, is everybody rowing in the same direction? Because
Yep.
if you're putting the work in, your people will put the work in. And if they have direction, that's the key thing. Like I remember back when I thought I was the best boss in the world, just because I'm a nice guy. Oh yeah, everybody loves me. But it wasn't until I realized that I wasn't really asking them. My culture wasn't great because I was taking on customers that were abusive, but I was getting paid. Mm-hmm. But my people weren't happy. They were having a hard time dealing with that. So it's not until, first, one of the first pains was, oh, by the way, you're going to probably have to let go 2 people starting this process. And here's why. They're never, ever going to row in the same direction. There's not a seat for them, right? Because you want to make sure everybody's in the right seat. That's the other part. And once that all clicked, it's very, very much like just a light going off in your head. when you see
Yeah.
it. Again, the work, you have to put the work in, you have to be showing that you're doing the work. You have to put that direction in place. Everybody has to buy into the system and understand their role and play it out with each other and understand the benefits to them. Why is
Mhm.
this good for them? And
That's
once that stuff started plugging in, like you said, it really changes the game. And again, I love the part that you said, like you said, sure, it puts the process and it puts the metrics and gets your efficiencies down, but you can only be so efficient without the culture.
and I mean, it's I'm a big fan of giving credit where credit's due, right? Drucker said this 60 years ago, that culture eats strategy for breakfast, and he's absolutely right. So right then, he's right today. That's a tried and true principle. If you think about building that vision, the biggest piece of encouragement I would have is don't function in a vacuum. A core thing that every good business management system, whether it's Patterson or EOS or Gazelles or Great Game of Business is make that vision clear, right? Make sure people know where you're going. But if you go way before creating a plan and get perspective, that plan is infinitely more powerful, right? In
Right.
America and Western society, we're speed driven, right? It's like problem, solution, just get me there as quick as possible, right? But don't do that. Like wherever you want this thing to go, and as the business owner or business owners, you get to choose that, right? Like I want to have a $10 million company. Great. You want a $10 million company. That's an endpoint. But go and circle what that looks like, right? What does your team think about growing to that size? What are your customers going to look like? What's the community impact? Talk with other people, bring other people in, because what I found, and one of my favorite things about what I get to do, and this is like right at the top of an engagement, is it's not just a business owner and me and across the table. It's like, okay, grab your leaders, grab your desk manager, grab your project manager, grab your sales lead, grab your key account manager, grab your admin or ops person or your finance person. They're all around a table. And we're circling around these topics. We're getting a bunch of perspective. But as this happens, and you talk about where we came from and where we're going and what are our opportunities and exploring these different exercises, it's like scaling a mountain, but everyone's in this group together.
Mhm.
And you start to see like where it was like this in choppy waters, everything starts to go, and you can see just like on a crew, right? Everybody's moving their oar at the same pace,
Right.
and everybody starts to, and this aha happens, this alignment happens when that plan crystallizes, and actions are just dropping out. Like, of course we have to do this, of course we have to do that, and at the end of that third day, everyone's like, oh yeah, we got to do this, we got to do this. Everyone's coming to the same conclusion, and it's rarely the entrepreneur who's saying what needs to be done. It's the team that's saying it, and when that happens, you don't have an entrepreneur who's having to be the tip of the spear. You have a wall that it's like using a bulldozer to push forward, right? And everybody is sharing the load, saying, oh well, we all have to do this, and hey, I'm over here in sales, but I need to work with Ken over here in operations to make sure that we're selling the right things in the right way and setting the right expectations so
Right.
that our teams are moving forward. And that's like that alignment thing. There's nothing but like that is the best drug I've ever experienced. It's awesome. So
Yeah, and I love that the people like yourself that are diving into these roles are more about helping people than they are about anything else, and that's really where I think things are changing a bit. You got, obviously your good friend and my good friend, Matt Lee, and you got people who are in the industry that truly care about the community as a whole and trying to help. So that's one thing I want to get across to anybody who's watching this, whether you're watching it again on the podcast or whatever, listening on a podcast, watching it on the site. Reach out to people like Ian and myself and George and people in the industry for help. We're all pretty much able to and willing to help. And by the way, we may not know it all, but we have enough context where we might be able to put you in touch with someone that can help with these little questions, tidbits. I get it. Social's out there and you can ask your question on social and you may or may not get the right answer, but try to get yourself into these circles of people who are really dedicated to helping, helping the community. Just, it doesn't matter how big you are, how small you are, doesn't the maturity level. You reach out to some of these folks like Ian and ask these questions. If they can't help you, they'll put you in touch with someone who can. And that's more powerful than just about anything. And when I say that, I mean, when Ian says get help and talk to other people, is talking about that, like build up your sphere of influence by going to other MSPs. Stop worrying about competition. Start thinking about co-opetition, as our friend Bob Coppage coined the phrase, I think. And understand that castle mentality's got to go away. Talk to other people. It doesn't matter if they're in your geo. You're not stealing someone's special sauce. They're not stealing your special sauce. You may find that there are things that they do that you don't do. And that's a way to connect. So Ian, from an experience standpoint, because I know you've done this for a long time and you did have a very successful MSP, whether, the reasons for getting out one way or the other, right? You had listed some very good reasons, by the way. You did have a successful MSP and you did things in a certain direction. For the people who are plugging into this and, getting a better understanding of, how you're helping and what you did from your history. I want to ask a question that kind of maybe helps a little bit, and so in all of your dealings from an MSP perspective with the vendors in the space, and I have two questions for you. One, what was, and I'm sure there's a bunch on both sides of this, but just try to find one. What is one kind of aha moment that shifted your thought in your business and got you, going in the right direction? And then what was one negative thing that happened that helped you shift in the positive direction? So two things, and maybe they're the same thing, but I always throw that out there because some people will say, yeah, that actually this bad thing happened and it actually kicked me in the butt and I changed this. And then also, what I always say, a peer group or connecting, because those are the things that kind of helped me by talking to my peers. But so those two questions, if they become the same, that's fine. But I ask both because sometimes it's a negative thing that kicks you in the rear and gets you going in the right direction.
Yeah. So let me start off with the negative one first, which really I'll explain why it's negative. So there's two guys who are in my geography, and I'll call them out by name because they're awesome guys. It's Chad and Kyle Paulman, and they ran what I consider, and still to this day, an excellent competitor. So whenever I was talking with a prospect, I said, hey, look, there's a lot of good shops in town. And this was a strategic decision on my part because I knew that generally in pricing and service and scope and capabilities, we were all on parity. So I would list off 3 different guys. And Chad and Kyle were always at the top of that list. I said, hey, these three companies, even if you don't go with us, if you're getting multiple bids, invite them to the table. Sometimes I won, sometimes I lost when there's multi-bid with these guys. So it wasn't like, oh, I know I'll beat their sales guys.
Right.
It's just like, hey, look, these are 3 really good competitors. If you chose any one of us, I think you'd be okay. So if I'm the right fit, glad to be a service. And if I'm not, choose one of these 3 and I know you'll be taken care of. But I never really engaged with Chad and Kyle until after I sold my MSP. And the negative piece of not engaging with that local shop was I missed out on so much opportunity. I missed out on opportunity to optimize with someone who absolutely understood my market. I missed out on the opportunity for very, very good friendship, which has been developing and continues to develop. I missed out on the opportunity for partnership that now, like being out of the space, when you're not in the weeds, you can see things clearly. I always talk about altitude, and when you're running an MSP, even if you're looking down at the forest of your MSP, you are in the forest of industry. And when you're not worrying about running an MSP, it's easy to see down and go, man, you have this huge opportunity to talk with your peers. For example, form a friendly relationship with another MSP in your town and audit each other's customers to a set standard. You can have third-party audits with amazing results. But I just missed out on so much opportunity. And now I talk with every strategic planner, coach, sales and marketing person I don't care who you are, I want to talk to you, because there is zero reason to not have that conversation and deep dive in there. I've got a very good relationship with an EOS implementer, and that is like that's a direct competitor, right? If you're using EOS, chances are you're not using Stratop, direct competitor. But it's so valuable having that conversation with that peer, even though we target the same industry and same vertical. It's there is no competition. And so that's like the negative piece that led to a positive is that. Probably the biggest positive aha was, I would say, I got introduced to a really good friend of mine. His name's Walter Crosby from Helix Sales Development. And when I spoke with Walter, it's like Walter fundamentally, and he'll always say like, hey, this is like Park Avenue, it's a two-way street. But you know what? Like there are two-way streets where there's one lane going one way and 8 lanes going the other way. And that's what I have from that relationship. I know I get so much value from having that friend in my life. And he fundamentally changed the way that I just view interacting with humans. Now, he's a sales guy, and a lot of our conversations started with sales, but I am a better human because of that friendship. And so that was a really, really big aha moment for me, was meeting Walter and having those conversations. Like that was a massive impact on my life. So
Right.
that was near the end of the MSP career, which like learning how to be far, far, far more curious versus anything else. Like if nothing else, channel your inner Ted Lasso and be curious, not judgmental, right? Like that's a massive, massive impact in my world.
Yeah. So obviously a mentor, somebody who can, and it's always good to find those people who can, do that. And I find I have a lot of people like that in my life because I opened up to the channel as an MSP, became very involved in the community. I have I look at it and say, if something happened, I'd have a good amount of people in my corner and I can call on them at any time. And, you being one of them, of course. And, we've all become this family in the channel and we help each other. And that's the one thing that, I like to drive home about community. I always stand on my soapbox and talk about community, but a community isn't a community. It's not having customers. A community is something that when you belong to it matters. And that's something that Eric Bowles kind of coined. It's almost like Eric Bowles always coins the things that I'm thinking, but he has a way of saying it better than I do, but it's 100% accurate. You're not just having customers. These are people who are going to be stark raving fans of what you do. And and with no expectations of something in return.
Yep.
And that's something that's always stuck with me. And, I don't care. I'm going to help anybody and everybody who wants to ask. Someone wants help. I'm going to be in your corner. I'm going to help any way I can. And I think that's the community that we're starting to get to. We're starting to build to, like I said, when you see people, like the Matt Lees, like yourself, like Henry, Tim, there are people in the community, George Bardisi, in the community trying to help and trying to push forward. And it's funny, sometimes these people get taken down a notch because they're just trying to help and people aren't reading it properly, right? You've seen people, take shots at George or take shots at people who are just putting themselves out there and saying, hey, this is for you. This is for the community. And I think we need to really keep on expanding this. And I'm really hopeful for the future when I see folks like Henry and some of these younger guys. Henry hates it when I call him a younger guy, but he's a younger guy. He's younger than me. But, so I think, I know there's just some really great things heading down the pike. Yeah, Keith, I am not your mentor and you definitely don't need help getting out of your shell.
I think Keith wants to be you when he grows up.
Yeah, I couldn't grow that beard in 70 years, so it doesn't matter. So being able to get down that road and become that community that we really want to do, the whole, the age old rising tides raise all ships still hits home for me, because I do believe that's what's happening in our industry. And everybody's, plugging in their own special way, going down that road. And I know Keith loves this subject, and everybody talks about it from a standpoint of our name. We've struggled in this community. Cloud's been around for how long? 30 years. And we finally found a name for it that's sexy and people love, but we still can't figure out what to call ourselves, because our industry is so wacky that MSP could mean anything. And there's no criteria for being an MSP. It's, hey, I worked at IBM for 30 years and I'm going to hang a shingle here. Now I'm an MSP. What are your thoughts on the future of MSP? The name, the industry, because I do feel like things are leaning more towards that consultative, more transactional, not transactional, more prescriptive, that we've talked about a number of times. What are your thoughts on, the future of the term MSP and where this is all going?
Yeah, so the labeling aside, I can see that there's probably going to be there'll be, if I'm being fearless and making a prediction, I would see that there's going to be two camps. Okay, there will be product resellers who are reselling even services that are productized services, productized items, etc. There will be a product reseller. There will be a new batch of VARs who are primarily product driven and will have a discounted service rate tied to those products. And those might be small VARs and those might be large VARs. Okay.
Right.
And maybe the way they deliver their services is time and material. Maybe the way they deliver them is fixed fee, but there will be a batch of MSPs who are becoming productized VARs. And there will be a batch of MSPs that disconnect from product and become much more of a doctor, lawyer, consultative nature, who may or may not resell products at all. And again, maybe it's fixed fee, maybe it is project basis, maybe it's recurring value-based proposition type work that really come in and focus much more on business outcome and an alignment. And there's a place in the market for both, because there are absolutely businesses who, due to whatever set of circumstances, and doesn't make them a bad business at all, view technology as a cost center that needs to be managed. And the VARs fit that very, very well. And there are going to be people who are looking to capture technology as a differentiator or an accelerator, something that will propel their business forward. And they are going to value a consultative approach, a prescriptive consultative approach more. And there might even be partnerships between those two organizations. That's what I really see, is that there will be a division. You're not going to be able to saddle the fence anymore. You're going to have to choose a camp and figure out the strategy, because the metrics and the measurements of success are mutually exclusive on both of those camps. The other thing that I will predict is that regulation will your auto light go off?
Auto light went off. Yeah. I'm trying to figure out how the heck it goes back on, but go ahead, keep talking.
That's all right. The second piece that I would say there that I think is going to dictate where people go is that regulation is a coming. Into this space. We are going to get regulated, and we're going to get regulated, I think, a lot harder than we expect. I would expect us to be regulated much more like banks and much less like doctors. So I don't think we're going to get a HIPAA CFR open to interpretation type of regulation. I think that there is going to be a prescriptive regulation set that will have massive teeth and will hurt when it is not followed. And that's what's going to start hitting people. And what the label is, I don't know. we're too into TLAs here. We're going to reinvent names no matter what it is.
Yeah.
And so I think regulators are smart enough to understand that they're not going to regulate the term MSP. They're going to regulate the business structure or the NAICS codes. Yeah,
I agree.
that's
I
coming
agree.
within the next 10 years. There's going to be a big shakeup into those two camps.
Yeah. And so Keith's point he brings up, he says, problem with terms marketing is it equals computer guy. There's no computer guy to properly provide service. One must stay in their lane. Do what you know and align partnerships with what you do know. And then he said, we have help desk, knock, SOC, development, network techs, planning and budgeting skills, etc. So I get that. He does concur with you on the regulated and education standards. That's true. And my thing too is, I know some people get freaked out. We talk about maturity and immediately people think, oh, well, I'm not big enough. Maturity and size have nothing to do with each other. You could be a 2-man shop or a 2-person shop and be, completely efficient, completely mature. I knew someone that had a 3-person shop that was absolutely crushing it. So it has nothing to do with your size. Maturity is about your breadth of knowledge in the industry. Are you doing the regulation properly? Are you efficiently doing your finances? Are you all the pieces that go along with being an MSP? So when someone talks about maturity, I always like to say, hey guys, it doesn't matter how big or small you are. Don't get offended by that remark. Maturity is not about that. And then on a separate note, or tying kind of all into this whole thing, I know people get freaked out when someone gets up on stage or someone does a speech and they say, you have to do this and you have to do that. The only thing you have to do is get rid of your liabilities and do the right things when it comes to this cybersecurity and regulations. Separate from that, if you want to be a break fix shop, be a break fix shop. There's still going to be a need. Someone's always going to want someone to fix their computer and change a keyboard button or fix a printer or whatever. So I always try to tell people, yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. If you're a break fix person, don't freak out. Don't feel like you have to move to MSP. If that's not your lane, as Keith said, stay in your lane and do your thing. There's plenty of room for all these little places. What we mostly talk to are the people who aspire to fall into the MSP category, which again, I hate using it, but it's the only thing we have right now, and want to get there. Those are the folks that have to start abiding by the regulations and understand what's coming, get some controls in place. And obviously that goes with your maturity level.
Yeah. Really just figuring out what it is you actually want to be doing.
Right.
It is a key one. And I had is it okay to pump up a little bit of content? I will anyway. So it's on our website or our YouTube channel. I had a really interesting talk with a good friend of mine, Michael Crean from Solutions Granted, about this, who started as an MSP and got to the point where, man, I hate my job. Right? Like I hate what I'm doing. I don't believe in what I'm doing. And he decided to reinvent into an MSSP. And that's not what I'm like, take the acronyms out of it, go and sit in a room with a big sheet of blank paper and say, like, what gets me jazzed? What gets me excited? What are the things that me and my team and everyone love doing?
Right.
And find a way that you can do that 80 to 90% of the time, and then take the stuff that you hate doing and say, how can we get rid of this? And so if you like being consultative and figuring out problems and creating the plans and stuff like that, which, like that's this guy right here, go do that. And if you like turning a wrench and fixing printers and fixing computers, go do that, right? Like figure out what's going to bring you joy. And when you're in that zone where where work feels like play, it takes a little bit of time, but people will recognize how happy and joyful and how much you love performing that service is, and the business grows itself. It's when you start focusing so much on, well, I need to arbitrarily grow, I need to arbitrarily do these other things, and you start taking on hats you hate.
Right.
That resentment builds in you and builds in your team, and that will come across in actions, mannerisms, tone of voice, the way you interact with people. And that's what's going to start causing churn more than anything else.
Yep.
You're spread
100%.
too thin, you hate these things, which means you're ignoring those things, which means you're doing them crappy. And when you do a shit job, people leave. Or Sorry, whoops.
That's
Fleet.
all right. That's all right. You said ship.
Yeah, when you do a ship job and you
Yeah,
hit
yeah,
an
ship
iceberg.
job. No one wants to be shipped. Yeah. So we're going to end on this question here. Pete brings up a point here in the, our good friend Pete Bussum brings up a good point here on the Q&A, and it's basically, he's asking, how much do you think will the platform or mega MSPs drive the regulation to try and limit or eliminate their competition due to big money? When it was just smaller scale, seems like the industry was left unregulated.
I don't think that's really I don't think that's a thing. If I had to answer that, I think that like if you have $100 million war chest, you're private equity backed or whatever, can you have a seat at the table to advocate for things? Sure. Are the private equity backed players or large war chest players going to advocate for things that align with their best interests? Of course they are, but the best interest of those likely will be relatively aligned with the best interest of customers. So I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I think what's much more likely to happen is associations, the folks like CompTIA, who are used to advocating in these sorts of areas, will survey organizations as a whole. So I think it's much more important to get involved with the industry associations that we have and start to provide feedback when they ask for it, to say like, hey, I am a small company, I am a $1 million company or $2 million company or $500,000 company, and these are my needs and concerns.
Right.
And let them be honest and tell them what your life is like, because they're going to be able to parse the legislative process much better than any one individual MSP or consolidated group of MSPs. I think that CompTIA already has that seat at the table, and the private equity guys are going to talk to theirs. So I think what's more important is to say, hey, can we get a survey of the $1 million guys so we don't get left behind? And that's what they're there for. So that's kind of the thought process that comes to mind there. I don't think a mega platform is a threat, because a $5 million or a 5-person company doesn't want to deal with a 500-person company. A 5-person company wants to deal with a 5-person company.
Right. And some of those larger companies, a lot of times they provide services to the smaller MSPs, right? And that happens quite a bit, where you can get, I'm not going to go out and become a SOC if I'm $1 million company, but I can go to one of these guys and rent out their SOC, right? And be able to do those things.
And spoiler alert, if you partner with a very large MSP and adopt their processes and adopt their methodologies and things like that, congratulations, you've built yourself an exit path. Grow it up to a standpoint, and eventually they'll say, hey, why don't we just fold you in and get some chips off the table?
Yep.
Nothing wrong with that.
Got to wrap it up. We're wrapping up a little early today, but Ian, as always, great to chat with you. I'm glad we're in the same city, so I'll be talking to you a bit more after this. If you're in the Orlando area, pop by. Ian's speaking tomorrow at 1 p.m. on the main stage keynote, and I won't give too much away, but it's going to be very interesting what his attire will be for the speech. So I think you all should come by. If you're in the Orlando area and you want to check out a cool keynote, come by around 1 o'clock. I'm sure Jennifer will let you come in just to check out the keynote, but there's a cool event going on down here, but Ian's keynote should be very interesting.
That's my hope.
So, Ian, thanks very much for being here. How can everybody reach out to you? What's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, I'm super active on LinkedIn. Just it's in/Ian Alexander Richardson. That's the name. Go ahead and reach out. I'll definitely accept the connection request, or r&r.consulting/connect. Can grab time on the calendar. Happy to chat with anyone who wants to chat. So appreciate it, Ken. Appreciate you, my friend.
Thank you very much. Glad I got to fill in on this one and work with you. And I'll see you a little bit later today.
All right, man. See ya.
All right. Bye, everybody.